Hello and welcome to the show Beyond the Journal, where we discuss social media, digital education, and current controversies in cancer and medicine. I'm Dr. Jack West, Associate Clinical Professor in Medical Oncology at the City of Hope Cancer Center in the Los Angeles area, and I'm happy to be joined by co-host Dr. Charu Agarwal, who is the Leslie M. Heisler Associate Professor of Lung Cancer Excellence at University of Pennsylvania's Abramson Cancer Center in Philadelphia. Hey, Charu.
Hi, Jack. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Tony Choueiri, who is a GU medical oncologist leading the GU group at the Dana-Farber Medical Center, as well as professor of medicine at the Harvard Medical School, and a self-proclaimed Browns fan. Welcome, Tony.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you, Tony. And, you and I met over Twitter. We actually haven't met in person, but so nice to see you here on Zoom. So I wanted to just start off by asking you how you started on Twitter and what have been the major benefits, apart from getting to know me and Jack, for you personally, your career and your collaborative efforts. Can you take us back in time when you started on?
Yeah, no, I started... I wonder where I started. So, should I start by saying when I moved I moved in the United States in 2001. I'm originally from Beirut, Lebanon, not Lebanon, New Hampshire. And I moved after medical school. I got educated in a French Jesuit medical school. And I moved, and my American birth is Cleveland. So that's why the relationship was the Cleveland Browns.
And I grew up there, so it really resonated very well with me. Long before they were winners, I was struggling through, even the Indians of the 70s, which was tough time.
They were winners for one playoff, game this year. Just, we still can call them winners when they beat the Steelers. So I spent 6 years there between internal medicine and fellowship in oncology, and I work with many folks there, urologists, medical oncologists, and that time Derek Ragavan was the cancer center director. And I moved to Boston, actually, and started it focusing on GU oncology. And since 2016, I moved in 2007 in the summer. In 2016, I became the division chief of GU oncology. So we're over 23, 24 GU medical oncologists now. And same year, in 2008, I became the professor of medicine, Kohlberg professor of medicine at the medical school. And, going back, how did that happen? Of course, the focus of GU oncology was more recently kidney cancer, clinical trials, translational research in that, new targets, taking a trial from a phase 1 to a phase 3. But starting in 2016, I believe probably that year, I start getting interest in social media mostly for two reasons. One reason is I was pushed. Like, look, you have to, it's a good thing, believe me. And I'm like, I had a small Facebook, still small Facebook profile where I keep in touch with my high school friends. So that's the only way. We're all over, not the country, we're all over the world. So I keep in touch and just don't let many folks in. But then actually I was pushed by folks at my institution and by a colleague of yours, Jack, Dr. Monty Pal.
Yes.
I was actively, mentoring for the past at large 5-10 years, a great guy. And he's like, you have to do that. It's good. And I said, what's the benefit? And he's like, well, the benefit is do you have time to read all those journals and get it all? You can get everything on your iPhone. So we started doing it, and interesting enough, it's a double-edged sword. This could be your whole life. but it's very interesting how much it could be educational both ways. So I learned a lot, about what people are doing and, what interest you have and what they've been. And I would never have learned that from other things. Let me give you an example that impacted me, positively. So I had in Cleveland several attending. I remember everybody wanted to do cardiology at Cleveland Clinic, right. And mostly because one of the icons, Dr. Eric Topol, and I knew he was one of the best cardiologists ever. But now he's more into social media, artificial intelligence, social justice. So, I start following him. It's like, look, I'm learning so much, and on and on and on from people that feed you not just knowledge. You look at their, you look at them in an interesting way, and you just can't pick up what you need. There's a lot of columnists at the New York Times. I used to buy the New York Times just to, read their column, like Tom Friedman and other. And now I just, follow them and I get it, and on and on. On the other hand, I was able, as much as I can, to send some of the, messages and some of the things I care about, whether in kidney cancer, whether in social justice, whether in COVID more recently, because I took an interest in cancer patient affected with COVID. I was just on the phone with a patient of mine admitted locally, with COVID, being hospitalized. And yesterday on the phone with the daughter of a patient of mine that is intubated with renal cell cancer on active therapy with COVID. I mean, we need to know more. We have no idea. So these are one of the ways, you could educate yourself, try to educate other, and stay in touch. And the other thing, people, whether we like it or not, there are forces that are stronger than us, that are shaping the world for good or bad. So when I get invited to a grand round, at a lab meeting, etc., and the lab folks, we read your paper and we know who you are because of Twitter. And I see myself like, but that's not what I want. But this generation that I'm not part of, that's the way how they communicate. Whether they read the paper or the methodology, I am not saying anything here. So you have to at least, be part of this if you want to continue, teaching and transmitting the message and your work. So that's in a nutshell how I think.
Now, you alluded to some pressure to be on it, and that's how some people are consuming content. And obviously COVID and the potential to spread misinformation or disinformation is all over social media. And I know that Eric Topol, I've seen some comments of yours and many of us who are trying to share information about COVID or anything else online are also trying to combat misinformation. How important do you think it is for people to have an online presence as knowledgeable, experienced clinicians, experts in the field to counter the crap out there, basically?
I think we have, as despite all of us, at least how we taught in medical school and this, a lot of us stay in their lane for many reasons, including we work all the time. Medicine is a 24/7 job, it doesn't end when you finish your notes on patient. So that's especially if you do also research. So we have a job that is busy enough to consume us so that we stay in our lane by default. But at the same time, we're citizens of this planet. And I think there is nothing more important than fighting disinformation. But you have to do it in a way where you are trusted, where you try to be as humble as you can and not be combative, not actually come up as arrogant, and just be as open-minded as possible and stop where you don't know. So I'm a medical oncologist. I can talk about COVID, to a certain limit. I somewhere I have to stop. So I don't know. I don't have the same, I would say, I can't be on the same panel like Sharu did with Dr. Fauci. I mean, I just have to, probably pass the mic. And I've seen you on the same panel. I mean, what would I ask him? I would take him to my field to comment on cancer therapy, so I feel a bit more comfortable. So you have to know where you stand, but at the same time, you still have a certain knowledge about, let's say, COVID, and you can do a couple of, papers and ask a couple of questions to come up as, somewhere where you added something to the literature, like the JAMA Oncology paper that, recently we published, and I know you noticed from seeing on Twitter, your reaction, at least to be able to be part of the conversation.
So just to follow up, if I may, you mentioned how some people feel a temptation to stay in their lanes and potentially be very narrowly focused, just exchanging information about their own cancer. Many of us feel like we want to be broader and speak on medical issues, but you also mentioned social justice, and different physicians have very different thresholds for how comfortable they feel sharing political beliefs or other social issues. I know Choueiri has, many of us in the wake of the inauguration had favorable things to say about that, but other people keep their comments or their thoughts very close to their chest. Do you have a perspective, anything that you would recommend to other people who are entering the field behind you and maybe reticent about how much or how little of their own personal convictions they should share versus keep that locked up and just have a professional persona?
I think one of the things, this pandemic and even this political climate, without, saying names, since now we started a totally new phase and we're going to look forward, unfortunately has politicized everything. And that is a problem. It's fine to be, we're all believers. And at some point, all of us were immigrant. At least I came off the boat. At least, I was an adult. And it's fine. It's okay to believe and to be whatever party or whatever set of convictions societal that you have, or whatever God you adore, that is fine. However, if you're going to start politicizing the Purell or the mask or the pen, that's really not necessary here. To take it us versus them, etc. We're all into this. And that's a problem. And that's a problem that was exacerbated by the political climate and climax at some point with the pandemic. I mean, this is a virus. This is every 100, 150 years, 200 years, something like that happened. But what I noticed is, I take it with my friends. I have friends, from all over, how suddenly everybody became an expert. Suddenly. I mean, including, I have to say, myself, in a way. But, and both of you, we all, tweet about the pandemic, etc. But at the same time, it became a fair game. And that is fine if it's based on knowledge, based on facts, based on things. But when it becomes based on just an opinion, or because this person said what, and you start looking and it's like, and say too much, you cannot stay a bit in your lane anymore. we've seen that. I mean, we've seen and this is becoming at some point very crazy, a bit inappropriate, and it's lead to, impediment of freedom. And even freedom of speech, at some point, it become the absence of freedom of speech if it's totally leads to hurting people and not saving lives. I tweeted today, I was, woke up in the morning and I followed the death in the US because we're becoming numb. I'm personally becoming numb. It's part of my life, not just the mask. And, I think the three of us have the luxury of working sometimes from home, of affording not to go to work, on and on, of having telemedicine. But for the rest, as of today, 406,000 Americans are dead. We're not going to talk about the rest of the world. Let's just keep it here. 406,000 Americans. In the history of this country, if you take the top 10 days where there were the most daily death in the United States, and that's the statistics I read a month ago, so probably now it's 6 or 7 of them are during COVID. And people continue, so we're becoming numb. And that, cannot happen. Every life matters. Look, you do lung cancer, there are many drugs you give that lead to a disease-free survival without an overall survival. Many drugs I give lead the same, and we cherish that, etc. Meanwhile, we have thousands that die every day of COVID, some of them because, they couldn't stay home, others because maybe they were told mask is not good idea or a vaccine is bad, on and on and on. I think about, even if you get a vaccine, but you're not going to deploy this vaccine, what's that good for? So I think here you have to step up. You cannot stay in your lane, and you have to talk to everyone, despite it's probably some of the hardest conversation I ever had. But if you're a responsible citizen, this is time to do it.
This just brings me back to, the phenomenal impact you're having in terms of, having a presence on Twitter in educating everyone and reminding people about also social responsibility. You've been very successful personally. I want to just pivot to another point where you're using social media perhaps really well is, your great strength on being a mentor to many. With the pandemic, a lot of things have moved to the virtual platform. So can you talk to us about your role or the role that social media and, various platforms have played for virtual mentorship, as well as promoting the work of your mentees? I find that within the GU community, there's a strong network of physicians that really band together and support each other very well. So, firstly, congratulations on being an awesome mentor, but also talk to us about it.
Well, a lot of times I think about it and I say, how, and you have to enjoy that. So you have to enjoy what you do. And I think, I was lucky enough that with some of my earlier mentors, when I was in Cleveland, I remember my boss at that time, who I work with, who introduced me to targeted therapies, retired now, Dr. Ron Bukowski, and people take a chance on you. Sometimes this is the only thing that make a difference. Like, you need that one opportunity. I mean, now if you end up messing 3, 4, 5 in a row and keep getting over, that's enough. But you need that. And, and at some point, it really, I learned a lot. So I discovered soon as I came to Boston and I start surrounding myself with people that ask help. First, I don't go and say, listen, I need to mentor you. Please let me mentor. I enjoy it. No, people come and we have a discussion. I think the mentee does have responsibilities. Definitely. It's not all falls on the mentor, and it's, the right thing. And I remember, one of my first, Monty reached out some time ago. He's with you, Jack, at the City of Hope. And Monty is very smart. Like, he doesn't need to learn. I think mentorship here is not like giving someone an article, tell them to learn the pathway to discover the, immune permissive effect that can happen when you ablate the VEGF receptor. That's fine. That's you can do, or teach them renal cell in a way. What's the treatment for stage 2? Everyone can read guideline. But it's about how to navigate the system and the situation at every time. And I noticed, and I started doing that a lot with international fellows in a way. Today I had a talk in Turkey with Yüksel Urun, one of my fellows. He's an associate professor at Ankara University, and Dr. Laurence Albigès, who's well-known and authority in Europe. She leads the Gustave Roussy group. I learn from them, more than they think, they know. So it's been really more so a symbiotic relationship. And this is another thing, is that with that you can grow. When you have people that are doing what you have been doing, then you start thinking a bit outside the box. How can you be a bit different in what you do every day? So don't kid yourself. I get as much benefit for my own thing and thinking outside the box as much as they get. And we continue that tradition. And now they mentor others. They don't need me anymore. It's like, I go in the acknowledgement section.
But let's turn to the issue of conferences and meetings. Obviously, it's been nearly a year since bigger cancer meetings and most medical meetings were transitioned to virtual versions, and they're not the same. In some ways they're lesser, but in other ways they are a really helpful adaptation, and they do open up opportunities for lots of people to participate who otherwise wouldn't have the time or money or potential support, to child support or child care to do this. So there's real benefits to virtual. And in the next few years, what do you foresee in terms of going back? Do you think that it will be in GU or oncology in general that we're going to get back to live meetings as the primary or sole function platform as soon as we can? Or do you think that there are enough benefits to what we've had and the benefits of virtual meetings that there will be some kind of hybrid coexisting version of this beyond the time that we have to do virtual meetings?
I think like what the virus did to us and we adapted, we're going to adapt to a new reality. The new reality going to depend on many things. So let's take, for example, the meeting we all cherish and go to, the two meetings, ASCO and ESMO, for example. It's not going to depend on the leadership there only. It's going to depend on the audience, and that's us. It's going to depend on our industry partners, which I know they play a big role in sponsoring. It's going to depend on the financial and the political climate, on and on and on and on. And something going to be in the middle, because there is a business, despite the educational, the scientific advances, etc. There's a business financial aspect to that. There is no doubt about it. I think they're meeting in person gonna happen, probably not as full in 2021. I don't see how that's gonna happen, but they're gonna start in 2022, perhaps at full. I see meetings sometimes happening here with a small core, especially if a lot of us in the field, get vaccinated. Perhaps, who knows, small core of folks, the leadership of the meeting. But there are a lot of people that will ask for even if it's become safe, for the option to have, the Zoom and the WebEx from distance. And that's how you democratize knowledge. Because that person that is, let's say, in India, that is very smart, actually can Google everything, speaks perfect English, but cannot come to this ASCO and ESMO meeting, that person perhaps will know more than you in oncology and can do things. And that person has the right, maybe not for free, I don't know, to also, get to know what ASCO and ESMO and other have to offer. In the past, what you do is very simple. You have to travel. If you don't travel, okay, you pay money, so you watch them later. I mean, people are not going to do that. So I think that's actually something that can end up very, very, very positive to the field, and we have to embrace it and run with it. There is always the financial model where you in a capitalistic society, you still have to make the growth and this, etc. But something gonna give up. I would love to have the hybrid format. If I can go to a meeting, nothing really replace the interaction. So there will be some sort of interaction, but I think we have to adapt to the exterior forces. If you think you're in charge and it's gonna be many folks and it's gonna land somewhere, the result. So we'll see how this year gonna go, and then we'll adjust.
Do you think that the GU community is more likely to adopt the hybrid fashion or hybrid format, or do you think this is going to be more oncology specific, not necessarily certain subsets of the specialty?
I think from talking to people, it seems that a lot, from what I heard, are going to have the option and want the option to be hybrid. But I also think if a couple of big meetings start to do only person and do that, that's going to be a problem. But you need one big meeting to say we have the hybrid option that the others will follow. And it's going to be adjustment. If one large meeting, and let's talk not just oncology, but outside oncology, 2-3 other meeting, do the only in-person, etc. And a big meeting comes in, society and say, no, we're going to have the hybrid. And suddenly the hybrid is more successful because there's a growth. It's all driven of growth in the audience, in the finances, on and on and on, with maybe some shaming on Twitter, etc. Then folks gonna, pivot back. I think I've heard people saying, look, I'm 70-year-old, I'm still active, but I don't want to take a plane anytime soon. And that is fine. And we're seeing, variant of COVID, of SARS-CoV-2 happen, etc. This is not going to finish this year. No. Let's see.
Yeah.
I think people should be open-minded.
Let's talk about the impact of COVID on screening, because you were part of a paper that just came out online in JAMA Oncology that showed a remarkable drop. And we've seen other data to suggest that in other systems. This was focusing specifically on Boston. And to me, one of the things that was rather surprising was that there was a resumption of activity again in the fall. I wonder, I'd have to say, I speculate that that's not going to be found everywhere. And there's likely to be geographic variability, system variability, depending on the hotspots for COVID and different rules and attitudes. But can you speak to the downstream effects, the collateral damage on cancer incidence and outcomes from COVID, independent of people dying of COVID in the hospitals?
So let me tell you what we did with this. Part of my research still deals a bit with health service research, a small part with one of my mentees, but now a totally independent investigator, a CDA winner, Dr. Kwok Trin, who's an associate professor of urology at Brigham and Women's Hospital and a robotic surgeon, prostate cancer. So Kwok and I, have looked with our mentees at 4 different 3-month periods. In 2019, then 3 months before the pandemic, the first peak. Then we looked at the period between March 2 and June 2, which is the first peak. Was lucky to just inaugurate the COVID service. And then we looked at the 3 months after. And we looked at the formerly called Partners. It's now called MGH Brigham. That's one of the largest healthcare system in the Northeast. And looked at screening in general for prostate cancer, for lung cancer, low-dose CTs, mammogram, etc. And during the 3 months, the first peak period, screening dropped by 80%. So, and then the screening was between 60 and 65,000 before tests performed, went to 15,000, and then the 3 months after, knowing that we're probably now in the second peak or third peak, I lost track of the peaks, went up to 51,000. So it picked up. And of course, there could have been in those 3 months some cancer that were delayed to be diagnosed, especially that screening, as you know, picks up usually early stage cancer. That means curable cancer.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing we found is that if you model this, you expect more cancer to be delayed, but we didn't find, we found less cancer. Of course, there is less cancers we found, but less than we expected. And the reason that is something, we were aware about is that we sent for screening the people that really are high risk. So colorectal patient who have 2-3 family members with colorectal cancer, patient who had an abnormal precancerous lesion or abnormal finding on their CT chest, but did not warrant a biopsy, warranted to continue screening, let's say, for lung cancer. So we found like that, the highest risk patient being screened. Now that we are in another peak in Boston and things, we are following with more, in another 3 months delay. But I actually am hopeful. Why is that? Because during the first peak, we took decisions just we didn't know about. The flow was not optimal. The Zoom didn't work. We canceled some follow-up, etc. I think now, at least at the Farber and the Brigham, we have a flow. We know what to do more. We're more comfortable with telehealth, with telemedicine. We have a system. We know who to bring less. So I think I remain very optimistic, but the data going to be the data when we look at the 3 months, let's say December, January, and February, which we're looking actively into that.
I think it will be an interesting opportunity to see the intersection of a real life natural experiment in screening and the implications or the loss of screening for some sustained period and see what that
and you have to see what are the local policies. So there was surgeries, I remember, at the Brigham that was delayed if they're not very high risk. Maybe it's not them. Maybe people like me who probably, unfortunately, never go screening or visit their physician. Suddenly I said to myself, wait a second, I'm going to call now and have an appointment for a colonoscopy quickly and finish with it, not 6 months. So I actually went for screening because I would know that no one is getting. So it's hard to know what goes in people's mind in a way, but we're going to look at the data in the next month or two.
Okay.
That's actually very interesting. I wanted to change topics just a little bit and talk to you about, something you mentioned right at the beginning of the recording where, you were going back to your initial experience at the medical school in Lebanon and then in Cleveland and your journey to Boston. You've been clearly very successful at establishing very robust clinical trials as well as research program. Have you faced problems being an immigrant, being fresh off the boat, as you said, and how did you overcome those?
I think in general, I have been through hardship in my life. very much so. And I moved around quite a bit. I've been through hardship. But being, in oncology, and one of the reasons where I went into oncology is that when I was in medical school, one of my best friends in my high school, his brother died of testicular cancer. So one of the things, get me interested, you read, you think you know more, then you start liking something just because you can answer the questions they ask. So I am fortunate so far to be healthy in a way that I'm doing the Pan Mass Challenge, 160 miles biking. At first, never had a bike since age 13, never biked. So I look at my patient where they have, to go through the cancer, the emotional toll on the family. And I look at that and I compare and I said, that is fine. Were there things that honestly, I look at that where I say, yeah, that was kind of a bias against, that was that. Yes, but, bias and discrimination, everything, it's everywhere. Right. And yes, I'm an immigrant, but also bias also happen in many people, I can tell you, that are sexist. At least I'm in, Jack and I are men. In people of color, at least if I don't talk, people will not know, where I am. I mean, half of people are Italian. So I try not to, despite I overthink it sometimes, I just try to, go through it. I am forging a future, hopefully, for cancer patients, for my mentees, and actually, for my kids. And I'm fine. I think against the political climate the past 4, 5, 6 years, where everything was politicized. Mm-hmm. Everything, even if you are bald or not, things that, it's good to have an opinion and yes versus no about everything. But at some point, just do your work and just go take care of your family and do what you like. You don't need to have an opinion about everything, especially if it's a silly opinion, whether, these cards, whether you like them blue or white, or why they're having this as green and this is as blue. Let's spend half an hour discussing why Tony Choueiri have these two colors. Does that mean anything? Is he a blue-leaning person, or this is... I think enough is enough. It's becoming, counterproductive and a bit silly to spend on that. And, yes, I would say yes, there has been a lot, but at the same time, you have to move forward. I loved yesterday. Actually, it gave me a bit, I did have some shaking when President Biden, I think we can say president now, not president-elect, said, look, sometimes you're in trouble and you have to accept in hand. Of course, I'm not saying it as eloquent as him. And sometimes you have to lend a hand. How many times it's not all, us, them, me, him, I'm right, I'm not right. How many times, you think, Jack, even in your day-to-day, or Sharu, that's what you need to do. Adjuvant, OC, and high risk, EGFR positive. I can get you 50 experts that say yes and 50 that says no. And I can tell you 50 patients that say yeah and 50 that say no. At the end of the day, you have to move because it's becoming crippling. And that's a good discussion to have. It's actually a very academic discussion to have. But to have it about masks just because that's how you feel, I think sometimes you just have to move on.
Yeah, Tony, you're right. There's bias everywhere, but we need more Tony Choueiris in the world to sort of, dispel that bias.
Let me ask about telemedicine. I don't know how much you there have adopted it, how much easier it's been made. Certainly a lot of the state restrictions went away. And I know you see in Boston and certainly at the Farber, patients from other states. And that might have been a lot harder to do, to have someone from New Hampshire or Rhode Island or something that may be easier now in a different climate that has eroded some, I would say, gratuitous state telemedicine licensure restrictions. So how have you and others there used it? A kind of like the question about virtual meetings. Do you see this as something that we'll put aside as soon as you can, or that it is a tool that has been useful for a subset of situations that should persist beyond this? And how much do you see telemedicine as limited, particularly in the high emotional stakes of oncology, compared to a live visit?
I think, again, there is nothing black or white. There are situations where telemedicine is fine, and there are situations where it's less fine. And I've seen people at the end of the spectrum. I've seen folks saying, I will not, from, folks that deal with solid tumors, oncology, that said the best way to do, to do a hospice discussion with patient, and we know how these are hard. That's the hardest one. The best thing is to do a Zoom meeting where all the family can calls in, and that's how I feel with the patient 100%. I can't type, and I'm like, wait a second, where's the touchy-feely? And I have folks that does the opposite. I would think the patient, who is, we have to see what the patient wants. Sometimes we have to put a red line where say, look, here I need to do, I need to see you because this is not working or this. But I think this is to say the goal is, again, because this is financial incentives. It's a model that is based on how much you see, how much you bill. And I think Medicare and other insurances are recognizing this. And hopefully with the new administration, this, is to stay. I would say patient on active treatment, you have to be careful. Yes, you can do some visit, etc. But at some point you have to see, how can you also make it, at the end of the day, make it, easy. We're taught, many of us, the doctor, the team, but it's a way in a service. And we want to see what is best, for patient. Look at the dialysis, 3 shifts. You have a night shift because a lot of people work. In oncology, still, you schedule something. My clinic is on Tuesday. You schedule something at 8 a.m. Well, what if this person is still functional on systemic therapy and want to go to work? Why do they have to take a day off? Why don't you have something that is a win-win for everyone? Perhaps there's a system that exists like that. So I hopefully now, if the major insurer come and Medicare said, no, this was just for some time, we can't operate like that. So I think we have to, again, be flexible, but there is no doubt telemedicine is here to stay. And the vast experience, at least to us, has been positive. Now, you're talking something about license, so that, will I have a patient coming from Maine when they come to see me in my state, in my hospital in Boston? That is fine. But do I need to have a license in Maine if it's telemedicine? I think this is actually very granular. If I've seen them before, it could be different depending on state. If they're a new patient, it's different. I could obtain a quick license for COVID, 1 page to fill out. But is this license going to stay 3 months, 6 months, or a year? Do I need now to spend money and effort to be licensed in every state? I mean, will there, and what about the international patient? Who should be with them? Under what governance? I think these are all evolving, but the hope is something like the government, the big insurers gonna play here to protect everyone and make it easy for the patient, easy for the physician, easy for the nurses, easy for everyone.
And ASCO may also have some influence here. We actually had a recent conversation with Julie Graylow coming on as Chief Medical Officer for ASCO, and they're obviously a stakeholder here in the ease or challenge of being able to facilitate that as an option for people, in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic, where there's catchments that extend across multiple state lines. It's a very real.
There is no doubt that ASCO has played an unbelievable role politically, and I'm so glad they got into this. And I think with advocacy, I know Dr. Bertagnoli, she's still a colleague. She was the president, is now, there is something about advocacy she is. I get emails and going on Capitol Hill. I signed up, last year. I think now we have to be careful, to go. But I like how ASCO, and I think ESMO is doing the same thing with developed with some of the countries. And I think this is time also for these big societies not to stick only to science and education, but take it to the next step for advocacy. And ASCOS does a beautiful job like that, no doubt. Take care of everyone.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Tony. This has been such an enjoyable conversation. Beyond the Journal is a production of Beacon Medical Interchange with support and distribution from Mark Lindsay of Talking Speaker. We hope that you will subscribe, share comments, feedback, and find us on iTunes or wherever you find your podcast. Thank you, and look forward to our next guest.
Thank you.
Browns. Go Browns. Take care.
Stay safe.
Thanks so much.
Wear the mask.